The first thing I like to do when I'm building cabinets or furniture with construction grade 2x4s is first mill the boards down to 3 by 1.25 inches. This will remove the roundover, square the boards up. It'll make the boards look a lot nicer, and they'll also be much easier to work with. So now I've got all of my boards milled to width and thickness, and the next step is to cut them to length. I've got 3 different sizes here, so I'll be setting up a stop block for each size. What I like to do is cut the boards nice and square on one side and make sure I hang that side off the table. It's kind of a mental note or a reminder for me. And when I go to cut them to their final length, I'll set up the stop block and I'll pull the board off the table, making sure this side of the board, the side that's clean and square, is up against the stop block. And when I cut the board to its final length, then that side of the board will be clean and square also. Now I've got all the boards cut to size, and I'm going to start making the face frames. I'm using this old Craig jig to make the face frames. A lot of people ask me about this. I bought it more than 20 years ago, and they don't make one like this any longer. I had to move the piston back. You can see those are the original holes for when I'm using it with 3/4 material. I moved the piston back and it still doesn't quite reach the 2x4. So I'm using this block of wood as a shim. All these face frames are going to be exactly the same. So I've marked out where the board is going to go. It's going to go in between these 2 lines here. So before I put the first face frame together, I'll move one aside and I'll transfer those marks onto another. This would be the style. And that way when I go to build the next one, I can grab another board and transfer those marks. And that way I don't have to keep measuring. I'm sure you noticed that the Craig screws I'm using are blue, and these screws are specifically designed for exterior use. They also have a coarse thread, which is better for working with soft woods. Now that I'm finished with the face frames, I'm going to move on to the legs. For the legs, I'm using common cedar. Huge difference in price between common cedar and clear cedar. This is a 4x4x8, and common, it's about $25. For clear, it would be $50 or $52. Both of these 4x4s are what you would call the bottom of the barrel. They're in pretty bad shape, so the guys at the lumberyard gave me a discount. I got both of these for about $15 each. I didn't mind taking these because I'm going to now mill these down to about 3 inches. So all of this tear out here should be cleaned up after I run it through the joiner and the sander. Now that I've got the legs milled and cut to size, I'm drilling pocket holes in the face frames so I can attach the face frames to the legs with pocket hole screws. Because I'm assembling this cabinet after I deliver it, I'm building the sides and then I'll attach the back and the top once it's delivered. So right now I'm attaching the side face frames to the leg, but before I do that, I'm going to add a taper at the bottom of the leg. To make the taper in the bottom of the leg, first I've drawn an F. This is the front of the leg. I don't want to mess with this. I don't want to lose this corner. So first thing I'll do is measure up 4.5 inches. I'm just holding the square at the line that I made on the other side of the leg. Now I'm measuring over 2 inches from the front. Then I'll hold the straight edge of the square at the 2-inch mark and at this 4.5 inch mark. Now I'll flip the leg one turn, again, make a mark at 2 inches. And again, I'll cut on this side of the line using the bandsaw. I've got all of the cedar siding cut to width and length, and I'm just about ready to attach it to the sides and the back of the cabinet. But before I do that, I'm going to use a chamfer bit in the router and add a slight chamfer to the edge of the siding. I want all of the screws to hit the framing, and I also want it to look neat. So I'm measuring down 1.5, 11 3/4, 22.5, and 32.5, and I'll do the same thing on this side. Then I'll use a straight edge and connect the lines. The next step is to pre-drill a hole for the screw 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the board, and because I don't want to continue to have to make that measurement with my tape, I've traced a line on what I'm using as a work table. I can drill into this, it's just MDF, and I'll use this line as a reference and grab my measurement from there. So anytime I'm working with a new board, I'll grab my pencil and hold it at that line, and again, I know that I'm at 3/4 of an inch. Here I'm using a piece of scrap wood as a spacer between the siding. This piece of wood measures about 1/16 of an inch thick, so you could use a finish nail and that would work just as well. When I'm attaching siding to a cabinet, I like to work from the outside in. This way, when I get to the last 2 or 3 boards, if I need to adjust those measurements to have the same reveal and have them fit well, the siding still looks symmetrical and even. I am going to have to take this cabinet apart, number one, just to get it out of the shop, but also to deliver it, and then I'll reassemble it when I bring it to my friend's house. But in the meantime, I'm attaching the back to the 2 sides using pocket hole screws and these big lag bolts, and this is so I can fit the top and the shelf. I'm using a sanding block to add a little chamfer to the bottom of the leg, and that helps to prevent tear out if the cabinet gets moved around. I'm also adding a nylon dome to the bottom of the leg. This will lift the cabinet off the ground a little bit, make the cabinet a little bit easier to move around, and it also helps to prevent a moisture buildup in the leg. Now I'm attaching cleats to the sides and the back of the cabinet. These cleats will support the shelf. I'm attaching this top brace with a few pocket hole screws. I'm only attaching the brace to fit the top. I will have to remove this brace when I break the cabinet down to deliver it. For the top and the shelf of this cabinet, I'm using marine plywood. This is kind of like a mahogany type plywood, and it's meant to be used outside. It only measures about 1/2 inch thick. So I'm also going to rip a few pieces of plywood at 7/8 of an inch, and I'm going to use that to beef up the outer edge of the plywood on the top and on the front lip of the shelf. Because the plywood is only 1/2 inch thick, there's really not a lot of material to screw up into. So again, I'm going to use strips of plywood and basically build a frame on the inside bottom of the top, and that will give me some material to screw into and attach the top to the cabinet. Okay, well, it's been a few days, but finally I've got 3 coats of finish on the top and the shelf. I used McCluskey's Man of War Marine Spar Varnish. It's a great finish for outdoor use. I've used it on my furniture on the deck upstairs, also on the outdoor kitchen, the countertop. It's a little bit difficult to use in that it takes about 24 hours to dry in between coats. So I've got 3 coats of finish, sanding in between coats and applying the finish with a foam roller and a foam brush. Now I'm going to break the cabinet down, load it into my truck, bring it over to my friend's house, and reassemble it. I've got this clamp here to keep the bottom from falling. You can see that the piece of wood is resting on the side.